This program contains adult content.
Is there a God?
Big atheist.
Really?
What, am I an idiot? Come on.
That yes, it would be nice if you could throw your sins and your responsibilities on someone else. But it's not true.
It looks like far-left lunacy.
I don't believe that it's true that religion is moral or ethical.
You don't need to follow anybody!
It's not human intelligence!
If someone doesn't value logical consistency, what logical argument are you going to give them that will demonstrate that they should?
Hello and welcome to the Godless Rebelution. Today is Wednesday, September 1st. This is episode 348. My name is Dan Ellis, and I am joined by two wonderful co-hosts, Mr. Ryan Duffy.
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Taylor Grin.
Hey.
Woo! So glad to hear you guys' voices. So tonight we're just going to dive right in. Taylor has done some extensive research on Prager U, which is the subject of this show, and I'm excited to learn all about it. What do you got, Taylor?
Hey, today I want to talk to you guys about Prager U. Prager U is a fairly well-known video service. The service isn't quite the right word. It's basically a media company that bills itself as an educational company. Prager U stands for Prager University. They're not a real university. And it's the brainchild of conservative talk radio host Dennis Prager. I'll talk more about him in a minute. Prager U presents 5-minute videos on more than 300 topics, from the Israeli apartheid to gun control to socialism and lots more. Dennis Prager says that he wants the best thinkers presenting their best ideas. Their goal is to, quote, undo the damage inflicted by an education system that teaches U.S. students that their country is a land of inequality and racism and a place of which to be ashamed.
I never liked that line.
The
way they say that, you feel ashamed, don't you? It's like, no, I don't feel ashamed about what, might have happened in the past. I had no control of what happened in the past, but I can recognize what has happened in the past and try to have a better future.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Which is different than being ashamed of the past.
Yeah. I mean,
we shouldn't just keep it on the same track. We need to change lanes.
Well, yeah, that's exactly it. Like if there's anything I feel ashamed of currently, it's that not we, but a lot of people are choosing to set aside a bunch of our history and not even discuss it as if it's off limits. And if we do that, we're never going to learn from it and we're never going to advance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Prager U has videos with titles like Facts Don't Care About Your Feelings, Black, Millennial, Female, and Conservative.
Ooh, I know who that is.
Why I Left the Left. Why Isn't Communism as Hated as Nazism? We're One Step Closer to Dictatorship with Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
And What White People Are Superior At.
Ooh.
Oh,
that
along with other more bucolic titles like TBH History, The American Revolution Part 1, How to Prep for a Job, Defining Liberty, and Who Was Christopher Columbus. Those are some video titles. None stuck out to you guys there though, right? They're all pretty much the same.
What is TBH History?
To be honest.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Because that's the lingo the kids use these days. TBH.
Yeah. So they're going after a certain crowd.
Yes. And you can tell to a degree from some of the presenters that they've had on Prager U. Charles Krauthammer, which I don't expect honestly anyone to know. He was actually a fairly rigorous conservative intellectual. He was on Fox News a lot. He died fairly recently, within the last 5 years. But he was one of the last of a generation of actual intellectual conservatives, very well read, very well studied people, and was kind of notable because he was paralyzed from the chest down.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And to have been able to accomplish the amount of research that he did overcoming his disability was legitimately a pretty cool thing.
So he was Stephen Hawking's counterpart.
No.
I mean,
there's an opposite.
That smart and not that disabled, but yes.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. The opposite. Yeah. There's a bizarro world. He's the other. He's
right.
Other world.
If Stephen Hawking had studied political science and economics instead of astrophysics.
Yeah.
But I feel like I would rather have more Stephen Hawking's than Charles Krauthammer's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to make a bad Stephen Hawking joke.
Oh, it's all good. It's all good. Just roll on by with that one there.
Yeah.
So in addition to Charles Krauthammer, they have other respectable figures like Tucker Carlson.
Wait, you said respectable.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Nigel Farage.
Oh, are you doing that millennial sarcastic or well, not even sarcastic? Well, sure, sarcastic, ironic thing. The millennial
You guys are
irony.
getting awful boomer on me. All right. So in additional, there was Nigel Farage, Michelle Malkin, Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson,
Boo.
Steven Crowder.
Boo.
Everyone knows who Steven Crowder is. They just don't know who Steven Crowder is. If you've ever seen the meme with the guy sitting at the desk that says "Change my mind," that's Steven Crowder.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to do like a micro segment on him someday because he's actually not a terribly cool guy.
No, he's not at all.
Dinesh D'Souza, convicted felon Dinesh D'Souza. Adam Carolla, Charlie Kirk of Turning Point USA, and Douglas Murray of the Black Folks Aren't as Intelligent as White Folks bell curve fame.
And wasn't Dinesh D'Souza on the pardon list from Donald Trump?
He was. That's how he got out of jail, if I recall, from being a convicted felon for campaign finance fraud.
If I remember right, he didn't actually go to prison.
Oh, he probably got the rich person treatment.
He got here's the slap on your wrist, pay that money back. You owe us a big fine for campaign because he was donating too much money to political parties is what his
wasn't he doing like a straw donor kind of thing where he was bundling? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I did a survey of their YouTube channel and saw that they have a spread of material that ranges from pro-Christian, anti-separation of church and state, very libertarian content, some vaguely what I would call alt-light content that is very pro-white and like basically blames black folks for all of their problems, denies anything like, systemic apparatuses of racism like the 13th Amendment or redlining or anything like that. But it does buck against alt-right explicit trends in that it is very pro-Israel. And specifically, it's like very Zionist Israel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and it attempts to like literally whitewash a lot of our history.
Yes. Yeah. Both literally and in like a clever figurative sense.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dennis Prager himself is a Brooklynite. He's actually from Flatbush, which really disappoints me because Flatbush is a fantastic neighborhood. He worked as a conservative talk radio host for about 30 years in Los Angeles. He has attended yeshiva, but he does espouse Judeo-Christian values, and that is like his primary thing. Like,
so what is yeshiva?
It's like a religious, like not school, but like school. If I recall correctly, it's the thing where you memorize the Torah, but I'm not positive about that. Just because I'm just not raised culturally Jewish or in a region that has lots of Judaism. Yes,
it's an Orthodox Jewish college or seminary.
Okay, there you go. So it'd be comparable to like a Catholic seminary. It sounds like.
Mm.
Yep. Okay.
I figured I didn't know what it was, so I would ask.
That's fair, and I should have come better prepared on that. But
that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
That's what I'm here for, Taylor.
I appreciate you, Ryan, undermining me at my every step. No, yeah. So he attended like a Jewish religious school, but like that is juxtaposed against the fact that he makes a heavy emphasis on the like pretty common phrase now on the right, this Judeo-Christian value thing, which is really something that's only evolved in the wake of like World War II, when a lot of the folks who were very starkly Christian and wanted to like embed Christianity in government, also didn't want to be attached anymore to the baggage of a lot of Southern Christians in America who were profoundly anti-Semitic. And so they started rolling out this new sort of ideology of what they call Judeo-Christian. But it's really just the parts of the Jewish Bible, the parts of the Torah that were already important to Christianity anyway, like Abrahamic law and that kind of shit. Dennis Prager, in interviews with the press, has said that he tends to see Trump as a necessary evil. He once wrote for the National Review, quote, "Leftism is a terminal cancer in the American bloodstream and soul, and that voting for Trump over Hillary Clinton was political chemotherapy needed to prevent our, as in America's, demise."
I don't think that went well.
Yeah, we've got people in the wake of Trump's presidency seeking to overturn a duly elected government. That doesn't seem to be a great American value.
Yeah, I mean, it could just be that that's the chemotherapy continuing to kill the bone marrow of America the patient, but I don't know. I can't pretend to understand his reasoning. Prager advocates for what he calls Americanism. And as far as I know, this is like a him thing. I couldn't find references to Americanism outside of like him and his immediate circle. He describes Americanism as a sort of civic nationalism based on what, putting in air quotes, what he calls an American trinity of individual liberty, Judeo-Christian values, and identifying as an American first before other national, ethnic, religious, or other affiliations.
Yeah.
Over his religious affiliations, that seems a little strange.
Well, so he would say that one of the pillars of Americanism is to identify as being an American before you identify as being, like, say, Jewish or Christian or Muslim or black or, what have you, right?
I mean, it basically sounds like he's saying assimilate or get out. Right,
because where one of the previous elements of the Trinity was Judeo-Christianity, it seems to him like he's saying if you identify as an American Judeo-Christian, then you're fine. But if you identify as any of these other groups, we don't want to hear about it.
Well, and that's
kind of what I interpret from that.
Yeah, well, and that seems to run counter to the whole idea of the Great American Experiment, where this melting pot or mixing bowl of all different kinds of people.
Yeah, well, I mean, if only there was a 6-part series on how America was founded as a Christian nation, right? And
well, I mean, when I hear that, I also think along the lines of like people that come from other countries, especially people that come from South America, from like Mexico, saying, "Well, yeah, I'm a Mexican American. Like, I still hold on to my Mexican heritage, but I'm an American now." Yeah, I'm basically saying like, no, you have to dissolve completely.
Right.
Anything from Mexico. Get rid of that. Don't bring that here. Don't even use that term that you're a Mexican American.
Yeah. Well, conversely, like I grew up hearing about how we were Polish American and I can't speak a word of Polish.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, that would seem to indicate that then there are, that Native Americans are the true Americans, but I doubt that Mr. Prager would agree with that.
No, I have a feeling he would fall more in line with like Rick Santorum's feelings on the matter. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Hi, everybody. This is Mikey Weinstein. I'm the founder and president of the Military Religious Freedom Foundation, and you are listening to the Godless Rebelution.
You're a brain scientist. Can you tell me why I did that in there?
I mostly do clinical research in neuroscience. I don't really specialize in temper tantrums. Maybe you need a child psychologist or a binky.
It's a solid burn. I deserved it. I did. But please, can you help me? Why did I do that?
Okay, here's my guess. As humans evolved, the first big problem we had to overcome was me versus us. Learning to sacrifice a little individual freedom for the benefit of a group. Like sharing food and resources so we don't starve or get eaten by tigers, things like that.
Okay, with you so far.
The next problem to overcome was us versus them, trying to see other groups different from ours as equals. That one we're still struggling with. That's why we have racism and nationalism and why fans of Stone Cold Steve Austin hate fans of The Rock.
No, we hate The Rock because he went Hollywood and Stone Cold keeps it real, so The Rock's fans are the real jabronis. Point made. Keep going.
Well, what's interesting about you is I don't think you ever got past the me versus us stage. The Brainy Bunch is basically the first group that became part of your self-identity, and now that's breaking up. You're feeling this new kind of loss. and you're scared of going back to being alone. I mean, that's just my guess. The other possible medical diagnosis is that you're just a bit of a dick.
Thank you to everybody who has rated the show on iTunes and Stitcher and are following us on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. And to all our Patreon patrons, you make the show possible.
Getting back to it, Prager's organization is a nonprofit, and he says that he derives his funding primarily from donations. About 40% of his funding comes from about 130,000 donors, but the vast majority of the funding that he receives comes from the Wilkes brothers, who are a pair of billionaires who made their fortune by fracking. The CEO of Prager U is Marissa Street, who is a former Israeli Defense Forces intelligence troop. And she also was a headmistress of a Jewish school in New York. And not like a yeshiva, just like a regular high school, but that was for like Jewish students, as opposed to being like a seminary type school. But yeah, she served in an intelligence unit in the Israeli Defense Forces. Yeah.
They're also obviously earning money off of YouTube. Is that like their primary place where they're actually putting their videos up, or do they do a lot through websites as well?
Oh, well, so we will get to that.
Okay.
Because they host their videos on YouTube, but they market everywhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's where I'm just noticing, I'm looking at they have 473,000 followers on YouTube.
Yeah. And but they spend more money than they earn in revenue from YouTube. Like their job is not to make money by putting their videos on YouTube. They are putting money into their videos on YouTube in order to spread their message.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's the directionality of the flow of funds. And like I said, of their operational budget, and I'll get into more details on the numbers later. But 60% of their budget comes from a limited set of extremely wealthy, conservative individuals.
Who would like to see a certain agenda pushed?
Perhaps. Prager describes his model as give us 5 minutes and we'll give you a semester. Their current tagline is the smaller, short videos, big ideas. In order for a video to be produced for Prager U, it has to be evergreen, which means the content has to be relevant outside of a news cycle or current event context. And it has to fit the topic of what he describes as being Americanism. The videos also require a high degree of polish, which lends a significant air of authority and professionalism. Each video costs between $25,000 and $30,000 to make, and the production work is largely outsourced to independent contractors. The scripts are very carefully edited down to 800 words or fewer.
Yeah, I'll say from the videos I've watched, they're well produced. They do a really good job at it.
Dennis Prager told BuzzFeed News, and they were a fantastic source for this. BuzzFeed, New York Times, Los Angeles Tribune did really good articles on this that I drew a lot of my research from, where I wasn't going on their website and whatnot myself. Dennis Prager said, I regard Prager University as a university every bit as much as a traditional university. Unless one needs to study any of the natural sciences or math or a foreign language, one would learn more about life and gain more wisdom attending Prager U than attending almost any Western university.
Wow. So he's not at all full of himself.
No, not even a little bit.
Wow.
And as somebody who has attended several universities, I'm not inclined to agree with him there.
Mm-hmm.
When he says attend the university, they're not a real university. You don't sign up and go to class.
Right. Yes. But that's the point, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
just watch us on YouTube.
There have been no deep subjects upon which I have acquired real expertise, which can be conveyed in 5 minutes or less.
No.
Even in chunks.
It's making you think that history is simple. It's not.
No.
That's why I love Dan Carlin's Hardcore History. He will take one subject and it's 20 hours long because that's how long it takes to tell you the information.
Right. Or Behind the Bastards, right? Which will do one segment of one person's life and they'll do 2 or 3 hour long episodes covering that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So getting to your numbers question there, Ryan, Prager U definitely understands itself as a media firm. Their annual operating budget, and I found reports varying between 10 and 23 million. They spend about 40% of that on marketing, targeting primarily young people, from teens to college students. Analytics show that approximately 1/3 of all Facebook members have seen a Prager U video. Facebook has 2 billion people on their platform right now?
Probably.
Yeah.
It's It's
huge. 1/3 of all Facebook members have seen a Prager U video. The organization uses evangelical language to describe their goals, saying that they want to reawaken Americans. About 1/3 of their viewers are not politically affiliated, which they see as a persuadable audience.
Yeah.
A quote from their marketing head, Craig Strazzeri. Sorry, Italian bugs me. Craig Strazzeri says, "Show me another conservative group that has an audience, 1/3 of which isn't conservative. We're definitely not preaching to the choir." The show benefits from mutual sharing by and of conservative personalities like Steven Crowder, Joe Rogan, Dave Rubin, and Jordan Peterson, each of which have millions of viewers on their own, creating both a network of eyeballs as well as a pipeline to draw viewers further into conservative viewpoints. Prager U is not content to try to persuade young minds outside of college, replacing a 4-year degree, as Dennis puts it. They're also trying to get their videos into school settings. More than 4,000 educators have signed up to use Prager U videos for things like sexual assault counseling or race issues, despite the fact that videos like these claim that society doesn't make reporting rape hard or that there is no systemic racism. Prager U also has created what's called Prager Force, a student organization of 6,500 members in high schools and colleges that host campus meetings and attend conventions.
So how do they become a nonprofit?
By staying, they don't endorse any political candidates. In fact, It's been posited in some of the analysis that I've read that Prager U very deliberately, you cannot find the word Donald Trump.
Okay.
Anywhere. Literally anywhere on the entire YouTube channel, you can't find it. They don't endorse candidates. They only endorse ideas. And according to how political financing works, that's legal. You can be a not-for-profit. American Atheists does the same thing, right? American Atheists won't go out and say, vote Biden over Trump, right? But they will say, vote for the candidate who is most likely to respect separation of church and state or support abortion rights, right?
I mean, yeah. And I've always been full opinion that those rules need to change for what is considered a nonprofit.
Probably, yeah. And I think that there's a lot of not-for-profit reform that needs to happen in terms of how nonprofits show their books. Especially religious organizations,
and how you
which
qualify.
can skip a lot of those rules. But because they don't make a profit, they do respect the not-for-profit legal rules, as far as I've been able to see.
Okay.
And like I was saying earlier, the vast majority of their funding comes from private, very wealthy conservative individuals. As opposed to say revenue from their YouTube videos.
Yeah. I mean, because from what I see, it's a conservative marketing.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's functionally like a think tank of the Heritage Foundation, right?
Yeah.
Or the marketing arm of a think tank like the Heritage Foundation. But they are able to comply with the basic letter of the law. So what's wrong with these videos? And the biggest problem I have with them is that Prager U tries to label itself as a university. The word university means something, right? A university is an academic institution dedicated not only to scientific rigor, but a plurality of ideas. That includes liberal and conservative ideas. If you take an economics class at a college, you will find the works of Friedrich Hayes right next to John Maynard Keynes. You're going to find Marx and Adam Smith in the same textbook. Right? Because all of those individuals, left and right, made considerable contributions to the study of economics. It's not about presenting only a liberal point of view. Universities show you how things went from Smith to the industrial reforms of Marx, to the social reforms of Keynes, and on to the neoliberalism of Hayes, right? They will go through that stair step and say, here is how economics has pendulumed back and forth, and exchange that to every other field of study, right? Where they will have legitimate views from both sides of the aisle, because that's what you need to acquire a good education. Mm-hmm. But because in certain cases, reality tends to have a liberal bias, right? It is simply the case that the earth is not 6,000 years old, right? And so geology classes, biology classes will teach that the earth is not 6,000 years old. And it has created the sense in the mind of conservatives that because of that, colleges are liberal institutions and there must be an equal and opposite conservative institution. And honestly, it says more about them by way of projection than it does about the left. Mm-hmm. Ryan, sorry, you had something?
Oh, I was just going to say that the facts don't really care about your feelings.
Right. Yeah. In that regard, yes, they don't.
And they're not facts here.
Yeah.
Very much feelings on their side.
Yep. I found a really good website that did an analysis of some of Prager U's videos, and I focused in on one of those in particular. There is a video, and I'm explicitly not going to name the title of the video or the individual who was in the video, because I don't want that to detract from like the data, right? This video, 5 minutes long, cited no sources, like in the video itself, at the end of the video, in the call out box for YouTube. The video did link to a notes section on the Prager U website. But let's pause for a moment to consider that if you're marketing at people who you think only have the attention span for a 5-minute video, you are probably aware that they won't read those notes. Mm-hmm. Now, in those notes, there were 52 citations. Note that I didn't say that they cited 52 sources. There were 52 citations that led to 10 total sources. So
and how many of those were opinion pieces?
Yeah, we're getting to that. 3 of them were articles written by the host of the video himself. One of them was literally an Amazon link to buy his book. One of them was a live leak video that had been taken down. 2 of them were opinion articles, one in the New York Times and one in the Washington Post, written by employees of Prager U. And finally, there were 3 actual scholarly articles. But each of them were articles that didn't support the idea thesis of the video. They merely provided a reference to incidental statistics cited within the video itself.
Yeah. It's cherry picking at its finest.
Well, and so that's the thing. Yeah, that's not academic rigor. That's not plurality. Universities aren't left versus right. They don't need a right counter to so-called leftist universities. What they need is rigor, right? If you are a good academic, right? If you are a scholar, you can find information that backs up your political theories, right? Mm-hmm. You can find data which demonstrates what you believe in to make your arguments.
But you also have to ignore other data.
Right. Well, I mean, in some cases, yes. In some cases, no. Right. But the thing is that these videos don't do that.
Well, it seems like this is a lot of circular reasoning, like whether it's circuitous in the way that it discusses whatever information he's presenting, but he's using himself as a source to back up himself, which that is not at all the way things are supposed to work.
Mm-hmm. It's the same reason why almost a decade ago now, I was lent a Mike, whatever, Levin book by my dad. And he was described as somebody who really puts in the intellectual work and cites a bunch of citations and that kind of thing. And I did the same thing. After reading a couple of chapters, I went back to the footnotes at the back of the book and I looked at the citations, and over half of the citations were him citing his own previous works. And at that point, I put the book down because I realized that I wasn't dealing with a serious intellectual.
Mm-hmm. You're in an echo chamber of his thoughts.
Yeah. Or the thoughts of his near peers, right? Who also themselves weren't performing actual no shit academic research in terms of acquiring a sample, going through peer review, using statistical analysis to verify the data that they were collecting.
Hi, this is Allison Gill. I'm Vice President for Legal and Policy for American Atheists, and you're listening to the Godless Rebelution.
The Ten Commandments have underpinned Western law for centuries, indeed for millennia. What's wrong with that?
Well, what's wrong with it is it isn't true, of course. The fact is, anybody, Socrates, for example, Plato, his recorder, anybody who is interested in virtue, justice, truth, the right thing to do, is going to examine what is at the heart of good human behavior. But let's look at what they don't do. They don't stop slavery. There's no mention of it, and they kept slaves. So, hello. What a perfect society they had because of their Ten Commandments. What did God forget? The Ten Commandments are the hysterical believings of a group of desert tribes. Those desert tribes have stored up more misery for mankind than any other group of people in the history of the planet, and they're doing it to this day. To say that that should underpin the way we live, to say it's a commandment, that gives all your game away. How dare you command? You bid us be commanded. I think life is much more exciting than that, to do with finding out. It's not to do with being told by some awful patriarch.
Stephen, we're not speeching. We're trying to answer.
I am, sorry. I'm happy to. Because these damn commandments of yours, you say they've made life better. I say they've suppressed and tyrannized and bullied.
If you have questions, comments, concerns, compliments, corrections, criticisms, or concepts for content, contact the show via email at godlessrebelution@gmail.com, by text or voicemail at 330-81-REBEL, or Twitter the twatter at TGR Podcast. Thank you!
Just like the videos for Prager U follow a strict production format, their content tends to follow a pretty strict format. The videos begin with a generally true, but often cherry-picked point of information and then travel down a path of misrepresentation. For example, starting with the Civil War was fought over slavery. Yes, this is true. But pivoting to, and Republicans led the government of the Union, which fought against slavery. Okay, yes, true. Then conveniently ignoring the Southern strategy pursued by Nixon's Republican Party to realign Southern Dixiecrats into the Republican Party. And finally, Prager U will assert, so remember, Democrats were the ones supporting slavery. As though conflating Democrats of 1865 with Democrats of 1969, right?
I mean, I've heard the argument from people on that one saying there was never a great shift or a flip. I'm like, yes, there was.
I mean, I can show you voting record political maps, right? That'll show you how the Deep South went from red to blue, from blue to red.
Blue to red.
Yeah. Well, and then you can look at the number of minority groups and the percentages of those minority groups who vote for Democrats versus Republicans to say that all of those minority groups who are voting for Democrats are idiots is basically what Prager is doing here.
But note how this has you now in the defensive position, right? And we will put a pin in that, right? So another example is that the video might start by saying Americans support free speech, even speech that they disagree with. But then we'll pivot to, but liberals won't let conservatives speak at college campuses. But they're omitting that not all liberals everywhere, but that liberal college students are either not attending the speech because they aren't being forced to, or that those liberal college students are exercising their own freedom of speech to protest the speaker. Or in some cases, students are rejecting the use of their funds to be used as a speaking fee that goes toward the speaker, who then refuses to speak without being paid. I personally, Taylor Grin, was the communications department senator in my university student senate. This is the organization that says we have an allocation of student funds that comes literally from their tuition, and we can disperse that as needed for students to do research projects, travel for academic stuff, as well as to bring on speakers proposed by different departments to speak to their students if they're relevant to their field of study. It is well within the rights of students of the university to come to their student senate and say, we do or do not want X person being paid our tuition money to come speak here. And that's the thing. The speaker can still speak, They just can't do it for cash, or they can't do it without having to deal with some protesters on the way in. And for people like Steven Crowder or Candace Owens, they're in it for the money. They're not going to go to a college and speak without getting paid. And to boot, it gives them the ability to turn around and say, oh, I've been canceled. They haven't been canceled. The students are just saying, we don't want to pay you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, freedom of speech doesn't mean you get to walk into any campus you want and spew whatever you want.
For $80,000.
Yeah, that's not what freedom of speech is.
Right. But they will turn around and say that. Sorry,
I was going to say, and saying that those students don't have the right to protest that speaker, is taking their freedom of speech away.
Yep. But then they'll turn around and they'll say that all liberals just want to ban conservatives from having free speech. So the point I'm getting at is that most of the videos are bait and switch. They go from a sometimes rational position to a sweeping generalization of liberals, or from a mild critique of liberal messaging to a disingenuous representation of facts and reason posited by liberals. Or in some cases, like literally any of the videos by Dinesh D'Souza, or anytime Dinesh D'Souza opens his mouth, or I imagine if he woke up in the middle of the night and wrote something on a sketch pad, it's just an outright lie, right? For example, in one video, he tried to argue that fascism was a leftist ideology, despite the fact that fascism advocated for conservative positions like traditional values, women being homemakers, and business interests over unions. In another video, Prager U compared neo-Nazi and progenitor of the term alt-right Richard Spencer to Karl Marx, and said that the main difference between the alt-right and leftism is that the left is larger. Finally, and most insidiously, is that these videos tend to take a far-right perspective, but present that perspective as neutral in a matter-of-fact tone. They bank on the fact that the younger audience might not have encountered the opposing viewpoint before, or might be ignorant as to how far-right the arguments are, or how misrepresented the facts of history are being made. But now their internal Overton window has been shifted. And that's where I was talking about before, Dan. When you were now on the defensive about the Southern strategy, right? Imagine the person who had never heard of the Southern strategy before, and their very first way of hearing about it was a Prager U video that said it didn't exist. And so now you, Dan, right, not a historian, but knowing that real historians know that the Southern strategy was a very real thing, have to do the work of defending the Southern strategy being a thing that exists to some kid who just heard a very snazzy, highly produced, cut 5-minute video that told them otherwise. And that's it. That's Prager U. That's what it is. That's why you shouldn't trust it.
I would say good. How they're sitting in educational gaps. There's stuff that we don't really, that isn't taught in school. I had a history teacher in high school that I absolutely loved, because he would do the whole thing like, here's what the book says, but if you go here and like look at this, and this, here's kind of like more of the real history on these subjects. Like, he was a history teacher, like, I got to teach you this, but also keep this in mind. Like, this is for the test. If we go over here and look at these sources, it's a little different. Yeah. I remember growing up, and I took all the AP versions, the advanced placement versions of history classes. And it's kind of like interbaccalaureate for people on the East Coast. I don't know where the split is there. But anyway, one of the things we looked at was like letters by Christopher Columbus saying, hey, this place I just got to has a whole lot of really like technologically unadvanced people that would make fantastic slaves. Y'all should send some chains next time you come here. And, going home and talking about that, I was told that was revisionist history. No, those are his words.
It's not. Right. Yeah. They're his words penned in his hand. It's just that, the only revision taking place is that previously wasn't taught in school, and now it was being so.
Yeah. It's just like anything with our founding fathers, where you can go to the Library of Congress and read actual letters they wrote on subjects that you were saying they didn't write on, or viewpoints
under a glass panel. Yeah.
Yes. It's like, no, they wrote the Constitution. They wrote all these other papers, but they also wrote other things in conjunction with that were their views on those subjects. So there's more than just those few words that you like to follow, there's more explanation to them, which lend more light on stuff, which is kind of like, oh shit. So this is what he meant when he wrote that.
Yep. But that's it. That's what I got. That's Prager U.
Well, thanks, man. I learned a lot about Prager U that I was not aware of before. I didn't know, like in my own mind, I figured that they were doing their thing as a way to get money, but apparently that's not it. Well, I guess it is in a roundabout way. They don't make their videos in order to make money off the videos. They make their videos in order to make money from the people who are donating to make the videos.
Well, and the biggest thing is that they recognize that the average, sorry, I gotta use the right phrase here. The median age of a Fox News viewer is something like 65 years old. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Which is incredibly old, which is very, very old, right? Because that means they've got just as many people watching Fox News who are older than 65 as they do younger than 65.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's fairly well known that like conservatives tend to be older, and conservatives know that they have to appeal to Gen Z if they're going to keep winning elections, because millennials are going pretty hard to the right, to the left. Gen X is pretty split, and Gen Z is not particularly inclined to go conservative, and they've got to make gains as much as they can. And I think that that's what they're going for.
And well, like you said, one of their largest donors is in the fracking industry.
Mm-hmm.
So they want Republicans elected.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they do. Well, between that and the amount of like pro-Israel sentiment that they've got, like they are deeply, deeply invested in like anything anti-Palestinian, right? And it wouldn't surprise me to eventually see a video, if there isn't one that I just missed. It's like why war with Iran is a great idea, you know? Yeah, it's very clearly the brainchild of 2 or 3 different subgroupings of far right ideology, you know, being pushed out into young minds who otherwise wouldn't have bumped into them.
Yeah, like I see a video they posted 2 days ago labeled "A Palestinian Explains Hamas."
Yeah,
that should be interesting.
I'm sure that's going to be fair and balanced. Yeah. So, that's what I got. Do you suppose we should go about thanking our Patreon supporters at this point?
I do indeed. Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you for doing all of this, for putting this together. Before we go, I want to make sure that we thank our Patreon supporters. That would be 2 skeptical chaps.
Alan Firth.
Don't be a Richard.
Hunter Grin.
John McCullough.
Ollie Olson.
Sinead Duffy.
Steve Kuno.
Stephen Andrus.
Tiffany Hudson.
Vanessa.
Corey Ebert.
Jeff Peterson.
Jeremy Goodson.
Matthew Sanders.
Megan Mitchell.
The guy that asks questions before he finishes the show.
Special thanks to Alex Jones, Gay Frog Brigade.
Utah Outcasts.
Wesley Aaron.
Freethinker 215.
Janet Uter.
Purple Dragon.
Sarah Segovia.
Savida Kuna.
Theodore Sellen.
Tim Jacobson.
Trisha Weir.
A noble spirit embiggens the smallest man. A perfectly cromulent statement.
And a big thanks to our $10 per episode listener, James.
Thank you all very, very much. If you, dear listener, would like to become a Patreon supporter and hear more fun things from the show, like extended episodes, extended outtakes, clips from the cutting room floor, get your episode before everybody else, then you can do that very easily by going to patreon.com/GodlessRebelution, where you can contribute as little as $1 per episode. If you are not a fan of using Patreon and would still like to contribute to the show monetarily, you can do so by sending us money through PayPal at our email address of godlessrebelution@gmail.com. All that information is in the show notes and links for this episode. Thank you guys very, very much for doing this.
Hey, I just want to say real quick, For those of you who are regular listeners to the show, you know that we normally start the show off with a little bit of back and forth talking about our weeks. We're also going to be posting this to our various social media. But we'd like your feedback for episodes like this, where we dive into kind of deeper issues, where we just cut to the chase, right? And get right to the issue, and then basically have our banter in the extra Patreon portion. Or if you would like us to keep it in, put it a different part of the episode. We really want to get your feedback as we're kind of playing around with the format of our show a little bit. And if you could take some time to engage after this episode, we would really appreciate it. It's going to help us make a better show for you.
Yes, absolutely. That's all for me. I'm going to go do stuff. Work is nuts this week, and I still have to go do more of that now.
Oh, that's rough.
Excelsior.
Thanks for having me. Despite the fact that videos like these claim that society doesn't make blah, blah, blah. I started too many of my paragraphs with the word Prager, so I just completely lost my shit.